Hello and welcome back to Speed Model. As promised, we're gonna actually wind down on the modeling now. So, well, we're gonna finish it all up. This particular episode is a slightly larger episode because I've condensed about 2 hours of work into this one episode. But I promise by the end of it, we're done with the modeling. So from next episode onwards, we'll be focusing all our energies on texturing. So yeah, hopefully that's gonna be a welcome change. Some of the modeling in this episode is pretty fun, pretty interesting, so hopefully you enjoy. You're watching episode 7 of Speed Model. True to the idea of starting with the large details and moving towards the small, we're gonna start building little decorative items this episode, starting with a flower pot for the bedroom. After building a basic pot shape, I began to build the plant itself. Keeping it simple, we're just gonna have a stalk and 2 leaves. Unfortunately, I lost footage again. The way I modeled those leaves was pretty simple, just a plane with a seam in the center and subdivided. I proceed to add some shelves to the wall. Very simple shapes are used here, cuboids for the actual shelves and cylinders for brackets that'll hold them up. I take this time to replace one of my metallic materials. Of course, if you have too many reflective materials, it takes a long time to render. So I create a new material called Metallic Small that looks like metal, but is actually non-reflective. As its name implies, I'll be applying that to the smaller items in the scene, since the lack of reflection wouldn't be too apparent. With that done, I assign materials to the shelf and duplicate them over. Moving on, I decided to make a copy of the plant for the office bay window. I also created a number of paintings to make the walls less bare. Finally, I duplicate the shelves over to the office, just for a little more storage space. I turn my attention to the shower, building a little handle for the shower doors. Just a simple cylinder extruded and bent. Then I built hinges for the door itself by duplicating the metallic joints, breaking them into 2, and adding a little cylinder at the center. I move on to add door handles for all the doors in the apartment. I simply grab a cylinder, extrude one of the sides to form a handle, and use a lattice to shape it into a nice curve. With that done, I duplicate the handles to all the doors in the house. Let's add a little more life to the scene. I add a nice little fishbowl near the living room window. I'm blazing past a lot of what I'm doing here, since I did have some boring technical issues with how the reflections looked. I spent a lot of time tweaking refractive indices and changing bounce settings. Eventually, I managed to solve the problem with a little workaround. The water in the tank was in fact just a different refractive index on the surface of the bowl itself. I added a little plane with a bump map to emulate the effect of a slightly ripply water surface. With that done, I began to form a layer of sand at the bottom of the tank. I tweak up the sand layer so it occupies the lower part of the tank. I make a few adjustments and then I turn my attention to adding some water plants. I tried doing this with the particle system at first, but I gave up and just modeled it by hand. I simply extrude a cube in strange directions, occasionally branching out, and then subdividing the whole thing. I repeat this process twice to create 2 rickety water plants for both the foreground and the background of the tank. With that done, I begin to model a fish with the dodgiest of box modeling techniques. As you can see, I'm forming a very rough fish shape by extruding the cube in both directions. I give it some fins at the top and bottom, and then subdivide up the mesh. As expected, it didn't look very great. I took some time to tweak up the mesh, but eventually I gave up. I just got up, went over to our fish tank at home, and actually took a good look at the fins of the fish there. Turns out I had grossly underestimated the number of fins under a fish. I was short by about 3. I worked them onto the fish by selectively extruding parts of the underside of the fish. I shortened the body a little since I was going for, the cute aquarium fish look, not the supermarket fish look. You know the difference. place the fish in the tank, duplicate it once, and spend some time getting their relative positions right. I give the fish materials, and we have a complete fish tank. This is actually a throwback to one of my earlier works at least 6 or 7 years ago, where I made a fish tank in Blender 2.42. Times have certainly changed, though my art style hasn't. With that done, we turn our attention to the kitchen. I build a little salt shaker by using the lathe technique. I simply draw half an outline of the shaker and then spin it to form a mesh. For good measure, we'll subdivide it as well. I repair the hole at the bottom and then try to cap it off. I eventually opted to simply extrude the existing mesh to achieve this. I give it materials and duplicate it once over for the pepper. With that done, I build a ketchup bottle using the same technique. However, for this bottle, I also duplicate the bottle itself, chop the top off, and put it inside the bottle. The purpose of this? To simulate the actual ketchup inside the bottle, of course. I was all ready to render before I realized I'd forgotten one thing: room lights. While the actual lamps were in place, things looked weird because the light seemed to be coming from nowhere. I built a simple cylindrical light and distribute it throughout the apartment. With that done, we're finally ready to get some renders. This marks the end of all the modeling work. Things already look not too bad, but from this point forward, we can make things look even better by introducing some nice image textures. And there you have it. That's all there is for the modeling. Starting next week, we're gonna move into the texturing. So the couple of renders you've seen just now basically reflect, the final look and feel of the entire apartment. The only thing that's going to be different are the presence of image textures. And you can sort of compare, the difference, the effect that is created by image textures when we're done with the texturing. So yeah, hopefully you're looking forward to that. But that wraps it up for this particular episode. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, you're watching 0612 TV. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked this video, consider checking out the rest of my work on my channel. Alternatively, you may be interested in the last season of Speed Model. If you'd like to show me some monetary support, I am on Patreon. You can find a link to my campaign in the video description. Of course, you can simply like this video or leave a comment. I'll be sure to respond as soon as I can. To keep in touch with my future uploads, do subscribe to this channel. And for even more updates, check out the official Twitter account for this channel at 0612TV. Thank you for your support.